And do I have permission to share my screen?
Yes, sir, we will give. Yes, you are the co-host and we will give the permission also.
Okay, great.
Good morning. Very good morning, doctor.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. We are very proud to have you this evening here. In
Well,
India,
thank you. I'm honored to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I know we have a few minutes yet.
Yeah.
But I could share my screen. Let me see.
So if you wish, you can share your screen. You can check that is everything fine or not.
Okay, great. Let me see here. I do this. Okay. I must have it here. Let me do this.
Yes, we can see your slides, sir. Yeah.
I think that will be good. Let me see here. No, I can't see you though. Let me try one other thing here. If I share screen.
Yes, sir. We can see.
Okay, good. That's better. The way it sets it up here. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yes. Now we will
Great.
start the session. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Whenever you're ready, you can.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Very good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the 7th day of 15-day International Online Faculty Development Program on Teaching, Learning and Assessing in 2030, organized by Department of Physics, SRM IST Science Ramapuram campus. Today we have Professor Bud Jones, Virginia Tech School of Education, Blacksburg, USA, and I am honored to introduce him. Dr. Bud Jones is a full professor of education psychology in the School of Education at Virginia Tech. He has held faculty position as an educational psychologist at Duke University, the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, and Virginia Tech. He has taught 24 different types of courses related to motivation, cognition, and teaching strategies, and has conducted workshops and invited presentation at several universities. His teaching award includes the Teaching Excellence Award for the College of Education 2003 and the University-wide Undergraduate Teaching Award 2004 at University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, the Favorite Faculty Award 2007, and the Teacher of the Week Award 2013 at Virginia Tech. His research, which include examine instructional methods that support students' motivation and learning, has held to more than 80 refereed journal articles, 130 research presentations, several books chapters, and 3 books. He has received the 3 grants from the National Science Foundation for the total over $2 million to conduct his research. He recently published a book titled Motivating Student by Design, Practical Strategy for Professor, which is available at Amazon. So with this introduction, I would like to invite my our speaker to start the session. Sir, you can start your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me today. It's my honor to be here today and to speak with you all. I've prepared about a 45-minute talk or so, and then I have some time at the end for questions if you would like to ask me some questions. And I guess I would like to start out by having you think about, if you all are instructors, I would like you to think about one of your courses, because I'm going to ask you 10 questions about your course right now. So this will help us understand what may be some of the motivational strengths and weaknesses of your course. So this is just an example. So you can pick any course. If you're not an instructor right now, think of a course that you have taught in the past, or if you've never taught before, you can think of a course that you might have attended as a student. And what you're going to do for this is select one of your courses and rate it on this scale. You're going to rate it a 1 if you strongly disagree, and a 6 if you strongly agree, and then anywhere in between. And so if you have something to write down or can type it on your phone or computer, or write down with a paper and pencil 10 different numbers here. So for example, the first question asks, students believe that the coursework is interesting. So you should think like your students think. Do your students think this course is interesting? And if they do, then you'll rate it a 6 or a 5, anywhere between 1 and 6. And you'll do the same thing for these 10 questions. And so I'll give you a minute or two here to answer each one of these. So if you could write down a number for each of these, because then we're going to add the numbers later and calculate a score. So I'll stop for about a minute and let you answer each of these questions.
Sir, the questions are not visible.
Oh, you can't see the questions? Let me see.
Sir, please move to the next slide. Please move to the next slide. I think the questions are available in the third slide. Now we are in the first slide.
That's strange. Okay, let me switch here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was seeing able to see that.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know why it's doing that.
No, now it's okay, Professor.
Okay.
Now it's fine, fine. Yeah, the course is interesting. The course is useful to them. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. Let me try to make it a little bigger here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Professor, slide is fine. We are able to see the slide.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Can you
I'll
please
just give.
repeat? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm just giving you a minute to answer each one of these 10 questions by writing down either a 1 if you strongly disagree, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 if you strongly agree.
Okay. The course is interesting. Yes, I agree. Yes. They have flexibility in what they are allowed to do. So 10 into 60, I read.
Okay, I'll just give you Another few seconds here to finish. And I think someone needs to mute their microphone.
It is my kind request to all participants, please keep your mic mute.
Okay, well, okay, hopefully you had a chance to finish those. If not, we'll have a second to come back here later. So today what I would like to talk about is what are different ways that you can engage your students? And we're going to come back to those answers that you just gave in a minute. The first thing that you can do as an instructor to motivate and engage your students is to ensure that students understand why what they are learning is useful for their goals. So usefulness is very important. And the reason that usefulness is important is that people are more likely to engage in activities that they perceive to be useful for their future. So if you could look back at the ratings that you gave each of these items and add the scores. So look at your score for number 2 and look at your score for number 5, and then just add those numbers and divide by 2. Take the average of those two numbers and write that number down, and we'll come back to that number in a minute. Okay, so you're just averaging 2 and 5. Both of these questions asked students about whether they thought your course was useful or beneficial to them. Now, if you have a low score, there are several things that you can do to help students with this. I need to share my screen in a different way though, because this is not allowing me to let me go back to I'm sorry, I need to go back to the other view. Let me do this. Now I can. I'm sorry for the delay. Share screen. Here we go. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This will be better. This way it'll make it go one at a time. So what can you do as an instructor to help your students understand that what you're doing is useful? One thing is to explain the usefulness to them. So you have to think about, do you tell them how what they are learning is useful to their lives? That's pretty obvious. Another thing you can do is have others explain why it's useful. And one way to do this is to ask other students, either in the class, you can put the students together and have them explain to each other why what they're learning is useful to them, or you can ask a former student. So if you're teaching second-year students, you could ask a fourth-year student to come to your class and have them explain why what they are learning is useful. Or maybe you have a professional in the field. And so if you're in engineering, you could have an engineer from the community come into your class and explain why what you are learning is useful. So any way you can to help them understand how what they're learning is useful for their goals in life and their career. Another thing is to design activities for usefulness. So for example, you could have them go out into the community and talk to a professional engineer and have them explain why what they're learning is useful. Another idea, this one is probably more if you're teaching first or second year students, but have them reflect on their goals and provide them opportunities for students to set and reflect on their goals so that they understand why they're doing what they're doing, and then they will be able to better see how what they are doing is related to their long-term goals. Now, this talk, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of strategies you can use as a teacher, but I have a whole book that has a chapter on usefulness strategies and all of the other strategies that I'm going to mention today. So I won't go into a lot of detail, but the book is available for free online, and I'm going to give you the link to that. So if you want more details, don't worry. You have a whole, I have a whole chapter for you that you can look and read more about these. My purpose today is simply to hit on the high points to get you thinking about your teaching, and then you can go into the book at different points. You don't need to read the entire book. You can read just parts of the book that are most useful for you. So that's the usefulness strategies. Now, there's other things you can do to engage your students. Socrates has been supposedly said, wisdom begins in wonder. So wonder, interest, what gets students curious? Students need to ensure that students are interested in the content and instructional activities. And so you all know this. What are some ways that we can do that? Well, one reason we need to do that is because that people have a need for stimulation. We don't like to be bored. Again, it's very obvious, but we have to pay attention to that as an instructor. And so you rated these on number 1 on the survey in the beginning of this talk, and number 7. So if you could add your responses to number 1 and 7 and divide by 2, that will give you your score for interest. So I'll just give you a few minutes to do that. Just take your score from number 1 and 7 and add them and divide by 2, and that is your interest score. Okay, now we have interest. What are some things you can do as an instructor? Well, one thing is to design instruction that catches and holds students' attention. So you're constantly thinking about different things that you can do to do that. Another one is to get them curious, to use activities that pique students' curiosity about the content. And this is one that sometimes I don't do as well as I should in my own courses, but I really need to think about, why is this interesting? What can I share with students that will get them curious about this? And sometimes you can bring in ideas from the news, some current events or something like that, that makes it, that adds to what you're already doing. Again, I have more strategies about this in my book, but I wanted to just give you some highlights here. Thinking about how you can stimulate emotional arousal in students. So what gets them excited? Are there things that you can do? For example, if there's a controversy in your field or people don't agree, even scientists disagree sometimes on things like climate change or something else, can you have a debate about an issue in your field and have some students take one side and have other students take the other side? It tends to get them emotionally excited about it, and they defend their position. That's just one example. There's a lot of other things you can do to stimulate arousal. And then also thinking about what they're already interested in. Sometimes this works well, sometimes this is hard to do, especially if you're teaching 100 students in a class. You're not going to be able to design the curriculum with everyone's interests, but sometimes you're able to consider what are students interested in and how can you tie what you're doing to what they're already interested in. So again, I have a lot more strategies in a chapter in my book on interest, but this gives you an idea of the things that are in there. A third thing that you can do to motivate and engage students is to show that you care. So the principle here is that instructors need to ensure that students believe that others in the learning environment care about their learning and care about them as a person. So again, it's sort of obvious, but we have to do this if you really want to draw in some of the students. Some students may not care about this as much. They may be more interested in the usefulness or interest, but other students will find this to be important, and it can be helpful for all students. And sometimes instructors will tell me that it doesn't matter at the college level, but what we found that, in fact, that this is one of the most important things college instructors can do to help to motivate and engage students, is to show that they have a relationship with the students and that they care about their learning in the course. It's very important even at the college level. And we've done this research around the world, not as much in India, but we have some people using this in India. And we found the same thing there. And so why is it important? Obviously, we as humans have a need to perceive that we have secure and satisfying connections with others. And so that is the same thing in the classroom. And so you answered 2 questions about this on the survey, numbers 3 and number 10. And so if you can take your scores from number 3 and 10 and average those 2 scores, that will give you your caring score. And again, as you can see, it's about being respectful to students and showing that you care about how well they do in the course. You don't have to like the students. It doesn't mean that you are friends with the students. It simply means that you care about their learning. And it's helpful if you like the students, but nobody, sometimes it's hard to like all of your students, but you can show them that you care about their learning and try to like them the best you can. Some students make it easier than others. And so what are some things that you can do to show that you care? One thing is be approachable and relatable. Let students know that you are available to them and you're able to talk to them and willing and want to talk to them. Respect is very important. Ensure that students feel respected by you and that you respect them and that they respect you. In developing that relationship about respect is very important. And this can happen online and face-to-face. And by online, it doesn't have to be an online course. That's the type of emails that you write to students. And so that you show that you respect them in your emails, the way that you talk to them, the way that you write to them and communicate with them. Again, these are pretty obvious, but sometimes we have to remind ourselves to do this. And some professors are better than others at doing this. Again, showing that you care about whether they achieve the course objectives, and so that you give them chances to improve on their learning. And once again, I have a whole chapter in my book about this, so you can find more details there. But also considering accommodating students when they experience extraordinary events. So for example, when someone in their family dies. I just had a student in my course last week, their dog died and they couldn't get an assignment done for a day. And so I extended the assignment for them for 1 day. Little things like this to show that you realize that they're human beings and that they have feelings and other things going on in their lives. And it's hard because sometimes it's hard to know whether they're telling you the truth or whether they're lying to you, or whether you're being fair by extending deadlines and so forth. But that's a judgment you have to make as a professor, and the culture at your school may be different than the culture at my school. And so I know culture is important with that too, in terms of thinking about those things. But I tend to assume that the instructor is I tend to assume that the student is telling the truth. And if they start to take advantage of me over time, then I'll deal with that. But I tend to extend deadlines and be accommodating to students as I can for extraordinary events that come up in their lives. And again, if you were trying to get students into the physics major, for example, helping them fit in to the class and to the culture, and even to your major in physics, or even into your college or university, helping them feel like they fit in. Different ways to help them feel belonging in that community can be a great way to help them become motivated and engaged. Okay, our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Okay, so that idea is at the heart of the success principle in this motivation theory. The instructors need to ensure that students believe that they can succeed if they put forth the effort. And what we're talking about here is perceptions. So they have to perceive that they can succeed. It's not simply that they do succeed. Now, when we do succeed and students get high grades, they do tend to believe that they can succeed. But some students will have the same grades And some will believe that they can succeed in the future, and others will not believe that they can succeed in the future. And what we want is for every student to believe that they can succeed if they put forth effort. Why is this important? It's because psychologists have found that feeling competent is a basic psychological need. And we feel like we're competent, like we have a high ability when we succeed. By success, I don't mean that it's easy. So success does not equal easy. You don't have to make it easy. And sometimes if the course is too easy, students are actually less motivated. So you can have a challenging and difficult and rigorous course, but you also have to give students the tools that they need to be able to succeed in the course. Once again, you all probably know this, but we have to think about that and make sure that we're doing it. And so you answered two questions related to this, number 6 and number 8. And so if you can average those two numbers, that will give you your success score. Number 6 and number 8. Okay, we're almost done here with your survey questions. How can you help students believe that they can succeed? Well, there's a lot of things. So let me just hit on a few of them here, and then you can read more about them in my online book. One is to focus on effort, help students believe that they can succeed if they put forth effort. And you can do that by encouraging them and by showing them that even if they get something wrong, that they can succeed if maybe they need a different strategy. So it's not just putting forth effort. Putting forth effort is very important, but some students put forth effort and still don't do well. In that case, you have to point out that they didn't use the right strategies. Maybe they weren't using good study strategies. Maybe they didn't actually understand the concepts or study effectively. And so there's where you need to help them understand how they can study better. One thing I do in my class is I call it a tips sheet, where I give them ideas that they can use for strategies to succeed in my class. And so I have a list of those things, and I'll ask them if they've looked at that and if they're not succeeding, and if they can do some of those things on that sheet to help them succeed. So I give them support to help them become better learners in my class. This is related to some research by Carol Dweck and others who have talked about mindset, and this idea that if there's a fixed mindset, when students have a fixed mindset, they believe that intelligence is static. It can't change. And the problem with this is it can lead to a desire to look smart, and therefore they try easy tasks and they don't push themselves as much as they could. And what we're trying to develop here is a growth mindset, the idea that intelligence or abilities can be developed over time. And this leads students to a desire to learn and thus put forth more effort. So we want this growth mindset on the right side, and not a fixed mindset that believes that you can't get any more intelligent or you can't improve your abilities. And so, again, creating an environment that promotes and supports successful learning is important here. The other thing to think about with success strategies is the appropriate difficulty. So how difficult are your assignments? Are they at the right level? And do students have the abilities to succeed? And again, this is very obvious, but you have to think about all your students, and are you meeting the needs of them? And this relates in motivation theory to a theory called flow, which was developed by Csikszentmihalyi. And what he says is, what he found from his research was that students are most engaged when the challenges here on the vertical y-axis, the challenges meet the skills. So for example, if your skills meet your challenges along this 45-degree line, then students tend to be more engaged, and people tend to be more engaged in what they're doing. And if the challenge is too high and the students don't have the skills for it, they tend to be anxious and not do well. And the same thing, if the challenge is too low for the skill level, they'll tend to be bored. And so you want to find that middle ground where students can succeed. And there's different ways to do this. Sometimes what you need to do is simply break down an assignment. Sometimes an assignment is too long in that you need to divide the assignment into shorter segments and have students turn in parts of the assignment at a time. Other times it's providing other resources that they may need. Maybe you give them another website, maybe you give them another reading, or give them some more example problems that can help them in doing the work that they need to do. So thinking about, do students have everything they need? And not just the good students, but you're thinking about, what do the worst students in your class, the lowest achieving students, what do they need to be successful? And are you giving them everything that they need? Another thing is how you give feedback. So feedback has to be honest, and it has to be specific. And it can't just be every few weeks. It's better if you give feedback pretty often, and that will depend on your course and how many assignments you have and how often you meet, obviously. But thinking about, do you give them specific feedback? And again, you can be honest, but you also have to be respectful. So you don't want to be mean to students, but if students aren't doing well, you have to let them know that they're not doing well, but also do it in a respectful manner that shows, going back to caring, that shows that you care about their learning and you're giving them this feedback to help them improve, not to punish them. The last thing I'll talk about with success strategies is being explicit. So do they know what they need to do? And looking at your instructions for your different assignments, are they very clear on what students need to do for the assignment? When students don't know what's expected of them, they don't believe that they can be successful. So making sure that your assignments are clear, your directions are clear, your tests are clear, and your assessments, that they know what they need to do to be successful in your course. So I know this is a lot of things and not a lot of detail, but I have more ideas about this in my chapter in the book as well. Okay, let's go to the last thing. This is the fifth and last strategy we're going to talk about to motivate and engage students today. And this is to ensure that students feel empowered by having the ability to make decisions about some aspects of their learnings. So they're making choices. They have some options in what they're doing. And if we look at this word in English, it's empowerment. And I had to look this up to make sure I knew what it meant. And it's to give power to someone. And what power, I had to look up power too. Even in English, and I'm a native English speaker, power means the ability or right to control people or things. So when you empower someone, you're giving them some control over something. And it's important because psychologists have found that feeling that you are in control and that you have some choices is a basic psychological need that we have, regardless of your culture, regardless of what country you live in, that this is a basic psychological need that we have. Now, in teaching, we need it to some extent. You don't give students complete control in most cases, but you give them a little bit of control and an amount of control and empowerment that's appropriate for where they are. If you take number 4 and 9, the last two that you haven't added yet, and add those and average them, that will be your last score for empowerment. So now you have scores for all of these: usefulness, interest, success, caring, and empowerment. And I'm gonna tell you what to do with those scores in a minute and how we can use them. So empowerment is number 4 and 9. And let me give you a few ideas about what you can do to empower students. The thing that most instructors do to accomplish this is to give choices during class or within assignments. So you might find small choices that you can give them. If you have different problems that you're giving students, maybe you have 2 different topics, some related to one topic and another related to others, and some students may be more interested and choose one topic over the other. that requires a little bit more work on your part because now you're developing 2 problems instead of just 1. So it does take more effort. Other times it's fairly easy to develop choices or to ask them to do something instead of you coming up with a problem and saying, okay, I want you to solve these problems. Have the students develop some problems. Okay, I want you to develop a problem that shows the relationship between power and current. Or I want you to develop a problem that demonstrates this principle of force or something. So you don't always have to come up with all the answers and all the problems. Let the students come up with some of those. So again, not all the time, this doesn't work all the time, but sometimes you use it as you can to motivate and engage students, giving them choices. Or you might have 2 different types of assignments. Maybe one's written or one's verbal. Maybe they can use technology to record themselves or use their phone and make a short video where they're explaining the idea instead of writing it down, and give them a choice of either writing it down or explaining it. Little things like this can sometimes be very motivating to students because they get to choose. And I have more ideas about that in my book. If any of you use project-based learning or problem-based learning or case-based studies, or have students work in groups, is very common in engineering and some science and math courses now. All those approaches are learner-directed, and they give students some empowerment. So you're already doing that. That's why people like to use those approaches, because they do give students some choices. You can also explain the amount of control that students have in the course, let them know that they have choices and that it's up to them. This one's a little more, can be a little bit more complicated, and I discuss it more in my book, but don't give rewards that may be perceived as controlling. If students are already motivated in your class, you don't need to give them rewards for every single thing that they do. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this one right now, but I explain it in the book if you're interested in that some more. And lastly, this can be a difficult one, but try to avoid controlling language or allow students to talk more. And by controlling language means that, you need to do this, you must do this. Instead, you can get the same point across by saying, these are the rules, and if you choose to follow them, then this is going to be what happens. And if you don't follow them, then this is what happens. And you're giving them the choice. And some of you may have tried this with your children. If some of you have children, where you tell them that you have 2 choices. You can either do this or this. But if you do this, this is going to happen. So that you still have control of the class, you still have rules, but it's up to them to decide, and it makes them feel more empowered because they get to choose for themselves whether they want to follow it or not. Again, I talk more about that in the book. Okay, I'm going to take a breath now and summarize. What we've been doing so far is talking about these 5 important concepts: empowerment, usefulness, success, interest, and caring. In English, I use the acronym MUSIC to understand this because it helps instructors remember these 5 really important ideas that psychologists have studied for the past 20 or 30 years. What the model of motivation does is it puts all 5 of these components into one model. And it says that these 5 components and ideas are part of the motivational climate. And what you need to do as an instructor is to think about each of these 5 things and how are you doing them within your course or within an activity. And when you do these things, students will be more motivated and engaged. And then as a result of that, they will learn more. And so again, just to summarize, empowerment means that students have the ability to make decisions about their learning. Usefulness means that students understand why what they're learning is useful for their goals in life. Success means that students believe they can succeed if they put forth the effort. Interest is that students are interested in and enjoy the content and instructional activities. And caring means that students believe that others in the learning environment care about their learning and about them as a person, as a human being. So that's a brief summary. Now let me tell you about the scores that you got when you average those numbers. Because what we have here then is the motivational climate. The students' perceptions of these 5 things affect their motivation, which then affects their engagement. Do they actually come to class? Do they do the assignments? Do they raise their hand and ask questions? If they're online, do they do the assignments? Do they participate in online discussions? And as a result of doing those things, they should learn more and perform higher. So this is sort of the theory about how this works and why the motivational climate is important. And researchers have showed connections between these variables. And so to summarize the music model is that these 5 components of music interact in complex ways, and we don't totally understand it yet. We've been doing a lot of research, and I've published over 50 articles on this topic, and others have published over 50 to 100 articles on these ideas, but we're still trying to understand how they interact, like in a physics course, compared to in a civil engineering course, compared to a history course. And so how do these things work in these different classes to create a motivational climate? But when you do these things and you think about different students, you'll be more inclusive. You'll include more students in your class and engage them, and you'll create a more equitable class environment in which all students can succeed. So you're not just teaching to the best students, you're teaching all students as effectively as you can. And again, this theory isn't just my idea. I created the music model based on a lot of theories, and here's just 27 examples in my book. I discuss them and present more information, but this is based on other people's research. What I've done is I've put it together and made it available to instructors, because you all don't have time to read all about all of these theories and to become experts in all of these, and you don't need to. I've pulled out the most important parts of these theories for you, and that's what the music theory does. And again, this isn't just an idea I had. We have empirical research data from students where when we give them these types of questions and do factor analysis, which is a statistical technique, we find that these questions, like the ones you answered, will sort into these 5 categories, so that when we give students surveys with 26 items on them related to music, those items will sort into these 5 categories. So we have quantitative data to show that these 5 things are distinct and different. And if you wanted to know whether this is important or not, what we found is that these 5 music components, empowerment, usefulness, success, interest, and caring, we just published a paper in one of the top educational research journals in the world, AERA Open, and we found that these 5 components explained 89% of students' instructor rating and 93% of your course rating. So if you ask students at the course overall, how effective was the instructor, these 5 components will explain almost all of the response. So these 5 things are important not only to their engagement, but also to how they perceive your course. And when we used statistical techniques to control for gender, race, class size, and class ease, we explained almost 100% of these ratings. So if you wanted to know why do students rate me the way they do, and rate the course the way they do overall, it's based on these 5 components of the music model. It explained almost 100%, and we published this in a journal in which we had 30 different courses at a university, and we did the research on that. It's being used in quite a few countries. I've had at least 3 or 4 faculty from India contact me, and they're using the music model. Others may be using it. I don't know everybody that's using it, but it is being used around the world. What I've been talking about so far is how to design instruction over here on the left. So to use it to design instruction, you can also use it to diagnose motivational problems. And I want to end my talk today by explaining some of that to you. I'm not going to talk too much about the research. We don't have time to talk about the research related to motivation. But let me talk on this last part about how it can be used to diagnose motivation problems. And then I'll answer any questions that you may have for the last part. Okay, so here's the website, and I'll have this on my final slide as well. If you want to get the book for free, it's at this website, and maybe somebody can put that in the chat. I didn't do that, I'm sorry. But this gives you access to the different strategies. And again, these are just ideas. Some of these ideas may be good for you in your class, others won't. But the point of the book is to get you thinking about different ways that you may approach it. And you may just do one or two things, and I'll explain that to you here in the last part of my talk. I'll put this back up at the end of the talk. The way I think about designing instruction is that you have course objectives here, number 1 on the left. And then what you do as an instructor is you decide what instructional techniques you're going to use. At the same time, you want to start thinking about music. Do students believe that they can be successful? Is my instruction going to let them see why it's useful? Is it interesting? And so you design your instruction, number 2. Number 3, you implement your strategies. You actually teach the course. And then what you want to do is you want to assess students' music perceptions. What do they think of the course? You have your own perceptions, but what do they think? And so you want to get some feedback from the students. And I'm going to show you how to do that here in a minute. And then you evaluate it here at number 5. Are there any problems? And if there's not, then that's great. If there are small things that you can change, you make the changes. And then there's a cycle, like any design cycle we have in engineering or any design type of field, where it's a cycle where you make improvements and then you try it again, and then you make improvements and you assess and you try it again. And you keep going with the cycle as you teach the course over time. And so what I wanted to show you here for the last thing today is how to select them. I showed you some of the strategies. Others are in my book. Let's talk about how to diagnose motivational problems. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. What you probably do already is think about how it went. How is the course going? What do you notice? What changes do you want to make based on what you saw? And that's very important, and you should do that. You might even take notes after each class to yourself to think about how you can improve the course. Another thing you probably already do is you talk to some students as they're going out the door, if they come to your office hours, through email. How is the course going? What are you having trouble with? Is this interesting? You can talk to them, obviously. Another thing which you may do some of is survey students. And what I want to do today is show you how you can survey them using items related to the music model to get better feedback. And so what professors tell me is that they get better feedback through using this. So I'll tell you that in a minute. The other thing you can do is have another faculty member come to your class, and we call it peer and assessment here. I'm sure you have something similar where you have other instructors come in and view you and give you feedback on your teaching. So what I want to talk about for this last part, my last 5 minutes here, is how to survey students. So at my website, where you can also get a link to the book, the website is themusicmodel.com. And if you go there, you can get all of the questions in the survey for free. Again, everything I have is for free. I'm trying to help instructors like you improve their instruction. And so themusicmodel.com, you can find the user guide, and let me show you what you'll see there. It's a large guide, but it's very easy to use. Again, there are different scales that make it up. So you can, in the scale that you completed 10 items. In the scale that we use for research, we ask students more questions than that to try to make it more accurate. And again, we validated this over many different articles and many different samples in many different countries. And we have, in the latest version, we have 19 items, 4 items for empowerment, 4 items for usefulness. This is what the student completes. So you give this survey to students, and then you collect it and you get the answers. We have 4 items that they complete for success. This is one of the example items. There's 3 other items. We have 3 interest items and 4 caring items. And so students complete the scales, and then you get scores. You average those items to get a score. And so your profile might look like this for your class. And so you got scores with the questions that you've been answering here over the past 40 minutes. And so you should look at your scores now and think about, where are you lower? And if you're lower on empowerment and interest, you might think about ways that you can improve and strengthen those weaknesses. So if I'm lower on interest, I might think about a few things I can do. You don't have to do a lot of things and totally change your course unless it's unless it's not really good at all. But most people, you're probably a pretty good instructor. You can make some small changes. So what are some small things you can do to give students a little more empowerment if your empowerment score is low, or a few more things to improve interest? So for example, if this was your profile, you might think about how you can give students more choices, or how can you, for interest, how can you pique students' curiosity or get them emotionally aroused, emotionally interested in your content. And so again, then you would come back and you would select strategies based on that. You would implement them, assess them again, and continue with this cycle to keep improving your course. And I've worked with a lot of faculty, at least 50 to 100 faculty here at my university at Virginia Tech. I've worked with other universities, and we've done this, and we found that over time, instructors can make small changes that can have a big impact and will actually help to engage more students. Now, some students may already be engaged, and that's fine, but you're trying to engage every student, or at least most of them in their class. You don't have total control over their motivation. You can only do what you can do. Some students may not be motivated no matter what you do, and that's okay. Well, I'm not saying you can motivate every student all the time, but you want to do as much as you can to motivate as many students as you can. And a question that comes up is, how often should I give this survey? It depends. Sometimes we just give it at the end. So here you see the rating scale on the y-axis, and on the x-axis here, in this class, it was a 15-week class. We surveyed students every 3 weeks. So we actually have 5 different time points, and we were able to track the 5 music components over the 5 time points. You don't need to do it 5 times. Typically, we do it at least at the end of a course, near the end. Sometimes we do it in the middle of a course and at the end. You'd want to do it at times where it makes sense. Where do you want feedback? When do you want to know what students think about these things? Maybe you can do it 3 times. If you have 3 different modules in your class or 3 different units, you might do it at the end of each unit to see how each unit's different. It just depends on you. You don't need to do it 5 times like this, like I said. 1 or 2 times may be enough. But the idea is that you can track it over time. Here it stayed pretty stable over time, so I probably could have just done it once at the end. But it's interesting that it started higher and then it went a little bit lower. And so I would start to think about, why is that? And what could I do differently to maybe try to keep it a little bit higher instead of having the numbers drop? Okay, I've been talking for about 50 minutes. I've saved 10 minutes here at the end. If you have any questions, you can find more about me at my website, themusicmodel.com, and at my YouTube channel at Brett D. Jones. I have a lot of videos that explain more about motivation theories and some other ideas, and I'm trying to create even more content as time goes on. And feel free to email me if you have any specific questions, but most things can be found through my website. And so at this time, I'll stop talking and see if you have any questions.
Sir, thank you so much for your most valuable session. We enjoyed a lot for the past 50 minutes. I'm having one clarification. If you are saying about the caring strategies, In that you mentioned be relatable. What is meant by relatable?
Well, I think it can mean different things depending on the culture, but relatable means that they see you as someone that they can come to if they have a problem. For example, we have some professors where students will say, I don't want to go to that professor because I know I'm scared of them. I'm afraid to talk to them because, they're intimidating. They're so smart and they're going to make me feel stupid if I go talk to them. So you want to try to break that down. You can be very smart. That's great. But you can also be relatable to students and say, oh, I'm so glad you came. Let's talk about this issue. Let me try to explain it in a different way to help you understand it. So if you're relatable, it's someone that students feel comfortable talking to. They're not afraid to go visit because you don't seem that you're too that you don't think that you're too smart or that you're going to make them feel stupid, or and also that you understand students, that you may make comments about how some things they're going through are difficult right now, or that they have a lot going on in their lives, and so that you understand them and what they're going through, and that they're not just robots that you're teaching to do this, and you don't care about what's going on in their lives, and that you don't care about them personally at all. Does that help? Or
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your clarification.
okay, sure.
Thank you very much, Professor. This is a completely new model. Music model is purely based upon the motivation of the students and engagement of the students. We have a very good, very insight in this, a very component of this model. We will try to study further from your resources available, and we will try to implement in our classrooms, and we will see how effectively we are having this, so that our students will get benefited ultimately on that. Thank you for introducing this new music model based upon the motivations. We are very grateful to you, Professor.
Yes, well, thank you. And the other thing I would encourage you to do, we have had a lot of professors, if they do this in their course and they try something new, they might try to publish the results in a journal that publishes studies about teaching. So if that's of interest to any of you who are, even if you're an instructor, you could publish an article that might help others, where you explain what you did and report your music scores before and after, or try two different things, and you can actually report this and write a journal article about it, or do a presentation at a conference. So we've had a lot of faculty do that. So that's something else to think about. You don't have to do that, but that's something to think about if you're interested in that type of thing.
So participants, any questions, please? We can unmute yourself and ask, Professor.
Thanks for your comments here, and definitely let me know if you've, like I said, some at least 3 or 4 faculty from universities in India have contacted me, but sometimes I don't know who's using it. So if you want to share that with me, that's fine. You don't have to.
Sir, you told about the music model is used in Indian universities. What are the universities they are using music model in India?
Well, I've heard of some faculty at, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, NAFA College, NAFFA is one. There's also one called the American College in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, Madurai. Yeah, yes. American College. Yeah.
Also, a nursing college in Yathar's nursing college. Those are just a few of the ones that I've heard about. Some faculty using it.
And we also appreciate that some of the images you add in your presentation, it's exclusively you are more conscious to take it from the Indian context.
Right.
Yeah, we enjoy that.
Yeah, I tried to find some photos online. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if there is no more question, we are at the end of the session. So at this point, I would like to say thanks to our speaker and to our audience. Sir, you have explained this musical model very nicely, and you nicely explained how we can use this model to improve our teaching, and how we can introduce the new teaching strategies by using this model. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
once again, yeah,
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much.
I
Thank
thank you for inviting me, and please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck in your teaching.
Sure,
Thank you, sir.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear participants, the feedback link is in the chat box. Please go ahead and fill that.
Thank you.
So at this point, we will end this